Why don't we start, Brad? You want to start with the first page on love and forgiveness?
Yeah. 117, the missing link, love and forgiveness. Love and understanding harmonize the mind of humanity to its true inner nature. What you get in life is what you receive. To give life is to receive love. A mind full of love and good feelings can never go wrong. Love and forgiveness go hand in hand. Without them, life is encumbered by ill feelings and unhappiness.
Oh, powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerful. We may want to share comments. I think there's a powerful page. Not that there aren't many. Judy, did you have thoughts you wanted to share?
Well, one thing that I have noticed is in times like we're going through right now, happens to be at this time we're making the recording, going through this COVID virus quarantine, that it's brought out a lot of love and understanding in unexpected ways. And I don't know if you all have felt this way too, but just noticing the small things, they keep featuring little things on the TV news about, like one neighbor that's having her dog carry groceries over to her elderly next door neighbor, so she can keep the distance, but that she's trained the dog to take the bag in his mouth and carry the things that she's gotten for her neighbor over to her neighbor and then stay and play with the neighbor. And I thought, isn't that sweet? That's such a nice solution. And then the children that are getting together online to do their choir performances, the youth choirs that are meeting on Zoom and singing together, and people just doing these, the policemen that started the movement of cheering for the first responders, and the Italians singing on their balconies is so beautiful. So I keep feeling all this, that one of the things that's happened is that this has kind of awakened people to how beautiful small moments are and how much people mean to each other, and that love and understanding have kind of reawakened in many little corners of the world.
And that's so true. And the same thing has happened in the other direction with people that don't have this understanding, where you have spouse abuse going up and child abuse going up and violence, domestic violence, and your heart goes out to people because given the level of understanding, some people are like you said, beautiful things, and other times people are innocently really making things difficult for each other.
Getting caught up in their thoughts.
Yeah. To me, this is always a very powerful, because for a lot of people that I share this page with, they think that when I ask them, what do you mean? What does it mean? What you give in life is what you receive. So many people say, well, if you're nice to people, they're going to be nice to you. Well, that's not really always true, right? What is that saying? The no good deed goes left unpunished, right? So, but what it means is that in order to share love, you have to be in a feeling of love and receive it as you give it, right? And one of my first teachers, Dr. Rick Suarez, said just the opposite is true too. If you want to share hatred or anger, you have to experience it as you give it. Mm-hmm. So you're giving yourself the same thing that you're giving to someone else. He used a very vivid analogy that I'll never forget. He said, it's like the knife is inside of your stomach. In order to stab somebody else with hatred, you have to go through your stomach to get to their stomach. Mm-hmm. And that was just so vivid that what we do, what we give, whatever it is, we're receiving as we give it. It's filling us up at the same time that we're attempting to share it. So anyway, I don't know if any other before we go to the next page. If not, David, what? Oh, go ahead.
Just for me, there's an element in there that it's about giving and receiving, as you said, but it's there's also that bit about loving and forgiving yourself as the starting point.
Absolutely.
And if you can be comfortable with yourself, and love you for who you are at the moment, and forgive yourself for any anything that's gone wrong in the past or anything that might go wrong in the future, then there's a much greater chance that you'll be able to live like that and be like that with other people. And I think it's, like most things, it starts at home. So if you can look after yourself, love yourself and forgive yourself, then there's a greater chance that more people will start to experience that, because they'll feel that being exuded by you.
Well, and the three of you can comment on that much better probably than Judy and I, but it seems like in my experience over 45 years of almost 50 years of working with veterans, that often is a challenge because of the craziness of war, and not just what people witness, but what they do in that process, and finding that place of forgiveness of self and others seems to be and that's the goal, I think, of this chapter that Sid is going to try to point to us too. Okay to go forward, or
Yeah, sure.
anybody have we always try to say a special message to the soldiers, to the warriors that might be listening to this course. Is there any? I mean, I think you've summarized it, David, that's important, and I think Brad talked about it, and I know Fair has too. Anything more at this point, or?
I think that if there's something I want to add is that one of the things, maybe forgiveness is not only about the things we weren't able to, some people do in the army service, but forgiveness is about also like what we do now. Okay, so if I'm like finding myself, I don't know, like a lot of veterans, I find myself explosive or angry, or sometimes unable to deal with reality in a way I wish to. If I have like a standards and I'm not able to stand up to my standards, so also forgiveness should be towards that, because if you go around all day angry about yourself, this is what you're going to get, anger.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Okay. David, did you want to go forward with
Sure. Judging your own faults or the faults of others leads to unhappiness. A mind that dwells in non-judgment is a contented mind. A heart full of love is void of all judgment and is filled with a divine spirit. My love is like a red, red rose. Its fragrance fills the air. It guides me to a place of light instead of dark despair. It's obviously a continuation of what we've all been saying so far. I don't think there's much more I can add to that.
What came to me this week is that I can have judgmental thoughts come into my head, and two things that came to me, but clearer than they never had, is that there's judgment of the action and judgment of the person. That I saw it intellectually for years, but I think I actually saw it this week after 37 years a little clearer, that I can judge a person's behavior as not healthy, as not healthy, and not judge the person. That to know that the state of mind of the person, that somehow made sense. I just saw a new level of being able to judge the behavior without having to judge the person. And even the other thing I saw was, I'm reminded of that I can have a thought come into my head that I don't have to fight or feed, and it'll pass. Judy has talked about that for years, obviously, that it's in the flow of thought is to move on. And I remember a fellow who was very suicidal, who had made a very suicidal attempt down at Sarasota Palms, Judy. and his insurance at that time only covered 4 days in the hospital. And he was still pretty suicidal, and the only alternative was to send him to the state hospital. And he really was begging me not to do that. And I said, I said, I'll do that if you're willing to come and see me every day for a week, and to promise me that you'll contact me or contact the 911, whatever we had at the time. We didn't have 911, but to go to the emergency room. And he came he came to see me every day, and he came to my Thursday evening group where I used to have families come. And he came in Friday morning and he said, "Doc, I'm okay. You don't have to worry about me committing suicide," because he'd been struggling all week. And I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, something happened during the meeting last night where I realized that even when those thoughts knock on my door, I don't have to invite them in and entertain them. I don't have to entertain my negative thoughts anymore. I don't have to fight them, but I don't have to let them in, and I don't have to entertain them." And that really hit home for him, that he had a choice of which thoughts he entertained. Anyway,
that led to some very dramatic presentations by Dr. Pettit talking about all the people coming in your house, and they start bringing their friends in. You remember you used to talk about when you started entertaining your negative thoughts, they've always got a friend.
Oh, you've got more friends in the truck, in the Volkswagen bus out there. Oh yeah, come on. Who wants my ability to sleep? Oh, you'd like that? Okay, good. Who wants my ability to think clearly? Oh, okay, no problem. Who wants my ability to not feel a lot of tension and anxiety? Oh, of course. Anything I can get for anybody else? Oh, my desire to live? Oh, sure. Come on in. Yeah. But
people got a lot out of that, though, because they realized that, it's volitional how much you pay attention to those thoughts. It is like inviting people in when you really didn't want to see them.
Right. And with more understanding, it comes easier to have it be volitional, doesn't it? We can own that it's volitional. It is volitional, but sometimes when people are struggling, they have trouble owning that.
I think one of the things that I've realized more and more over the years about forgiving yourself too is that it's kind of, I had this one client one time that's really brought this home to me, because she was telling me this story of something she did in a manic-y episode, and she kept stopping and going, "Who does that? Who does that? Who does that?" And then and then she's telling me she did it. So I said, "Well, who does that is somebody who's not in their right mind at the moment." It's like you have to realize that you're looking at yourself now from being calmed down and looking back and thinking, how am I going to make this right? I've ruined so many people's lives. Right. And you have to realize that you just as people in your life are forgiving you now, you've got to forgive yourself and realize that the state of mind you were in, that was the best you could do.
Right.
And that's another aspect of non-judgmental is not, it's like, I'm not going to judge other people, but I still have all these thoughts about myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard for people to see that guilt is egotistical.
Yeah.
And they say, egotistical? I said, well, what are you thinking about? I've been there, done that. I mean, so, Ofer, would you like to continue?
Yes. Forgiveness is divine. It has wonderful effects on our lives. Forgiveness is a powerful remedy to clear thoughts of negative memories. It frees us from the emotional prisons of our past, providing opportunities to start life anew. Forgiveness brings forth peace of mind. Without forgiveness, the road through life is paved with doubt and misery.
Oh.
Should I go on?
Well, unless you have, do you have any thoughts there about that might be helpful to the warriors that you serve?
No, maybe I go on another one and then I think about it. Okay. An unforgiving mind burdens one with negative thoughts, holding on to yesterday's hurts. It contaminates and prevents the thinker from living a happy life now. It is forgiveness that allows you to see today as a new experience. God has already forgiven you for yesterday's mistakes, so why don't you forgive yourself? To dwell on past trials and tribulations is only to deny the moment. Okay, I have something to say about it. A lot of the guys I'm working with, they are very angry that after they were injured, they were not, they were not treated properly by their families or by their commanders and everything. And sometimes I can meet guys 20 years afterwards who are still angry. Okay, or maybe sometimes they can be angry that they didn't act. They feel shame that they didn't act the way they should have.
That speaks to that last paragraph about dwelling on past trials is to deny the moment. It's like you give away your whole life to something you can't change that's over anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It reminds me that I used to use the metaphor, and I hadn't for 25, 30 years, I don't think, of somebody walking into my office with really sharp rocks in their hands. And they're so sharp that as they're holding them so tight, there's blood oozing down both of their arms. And they come in and they say, "Doc, you got to help me. These rocks are really hurting me." And they don't realize that they have the ability within them to let go of the rocks, that they're innocently the one that's gripping the rock so hard that it's cutting them and causing the pain and the bleeding. And I think that sounds like, Ofer, that you've found that you can at times reach that place where people start to have that realization that they can start to let go of, like what you said, Judy, of something that's over. You can't change it. We can't rebake the cookie, right? Cookie's
Right.
been, whatever.
During the Vietnam War, my husband was in the Air Force. We were stationed in Okinawa, and our neighbor was a Navy pilot. There are a lot of Navy pilots in our neighborhood, and he was given some target to bomb. You know, every time he went out, he was to go to this particular target and bomb it. And he was very quiet about his work and the whole thing and everything. And then one day we realized they were gone from the neighborhood, and somebody said, "Whatever happened?" And he got court-martialed because he was dumping his bombs into the South China Sea every time he was ordered to bomb a village with women and children in it. He wouldn't do that. He was willing to bomb, where there were fighters. He was willing to bomb where there was fighting going on. He was willing to destroy artillery or buildings, but he was unwilling to bomb little villages. And so that he was court-martialed, and he was kicked out of the Navy. And there was big division that came up in our neighborhood between women and the husbands and the wives, because all of us wives were sitting around saying, thank God, because if the war was the other way and they were coming to bomb Okinawa, we'd be sitting ducks. We'd be out there hanging our laundry and playing with our kids in the yard and walking our dogs and, going to come and bring in our groceries in, and we would be killed. And, and our husbands were like, no, he violated orders. He was supposed to bomb these villages, and you never know who they're hiding. And it was a very interesting discussion, but it speaks to what you're saying, how war and all of the thinking about, who the enemy is can really distort everyone's thinking.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we certainly had My Lai,
Yeah.
and that we had massacres where whole villages were massacred, and in that massacre, there was a helicopter pilot and a gunner who stopped the massacre by landing the plane in front of the guys who had their guns lined up to kill a whole bunch of innocent villagers and their children, and had the courage to tell them to stop. That at the risk of being court-martialed themselves. So it's a, I'm sure having never had to be there, that it's easy to talk from a distance. And
Yeah.
my heart goes out to any soldier that's listening to this that has had to be there. I've treated many. I've treated one man who was told on parole that when they found a 12-year-old girl, to tie her to a tree and slit her throat. And if he didn't do it, that he would be shot in the back of the head by the officer, and then he would do it himself as an 18-year-old kid. He did it, but he lived for 45 years every night seeing her face.
Yeah.
And I remember the day that I think, I don't know whether it was Second Chance or I don't know what but the VA finally had him stopped having admitted there because he'd been admitted there so many times. And I remember the day that he sat in my office at the state hospital and he said, "Doc, I think I'm ready to forgive myself."
Mm.
And I said, I'm really glad, because I suspect that young person has forgiven you a long, long time ago.
Right.
And I'm glad that you're finally ready to do that and go on with your life. So easy to talk about from outside the lines of the game. So
Right.
I just want to make sure people know that listen to this. So I'm aware of the time. We've tried to limit these to about 25 minutes. Shall we do one more page here and then take the break? Is that it?
Sure.
Yeah.
You want me to read it?
It's a powerful
Yeah.
leap into the next part, I think.
If you live in the past, you can never find happiness. You are trying to live in a reality that no longer exists. It is a misconception to think that if you forgive someone who has harmed you, you are somehow condoning their behavior, making yourself vulnerable so that you will allow them to repeat their hurtful action. This is not so. There's a vast difference between forgiving a person and forgiving an act. I think this summarizes everything we've been talking about, really. And that includes forgiving oneself, to realize that we all do things in the heat of moments and then afterwards wonder who does that. Yeah. And and I think war is an undertaking that makes that much more vivid. It makes these moral choices much more vivid in reality and under pressure.
Yeah.
Only people with certainty can use words like all or never or
Yeah.
ever. And it's hard to argue with. If you live in the past, you can never find happiness.
Yeah.
Never is a pretty big word.
Yeah.
So maybe anyone who want to make comments about this last page before we take a break and then go to the next session?
I just think that this thing about this, there's a vast difference between forgiving a person and forgiving an act. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Just because there's, I think the first time I read that, I just felt this huge relief wash over me.
Wow.
When I thought about things I had done to myself in the past and really knowing that I was really trying to do the best I could with the thinking I had in the moment, the level of consciousness I had. And just really knowing that I could see I could forgive myself and also know that I was doing the best I could. And to turn that around to other people too, and forgiving people for what they're thinking too. I mean, it's been a game changer for me. That's these two little sentences on the bottom of page 121.
That's beautiful.
Really is. Anybody else before we?
Yeah. Take a break.
Okay, let's take a break.